Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Do want to say thank you to everybody for hooking us up with over 5,000 subscribers. We're about to go over 5,100 at the moment. So thank you for that. After we gone over 5,000, we're doing live stros. Our first live stream was this past week. We're going to do that weekly. Once we get to 6,000, we're going to do remote broadcast. Once we get to 7,000, call-in show. That's the carrot. So if you have subscribed already, thank you very much. Tell a friend, please. If you are a listener on a platform other than YouTube, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you have not subscribed, please do. I'm here with Josh Guest, and we are going to be talking Ole Miss football versus Texas A&M this weekend. Josh is repping his Doors baseball gear because it looks like it's about 7 degrees out there. This Florida skin just can't handle looking at that, man.
Yeah, it was, look, bandy game past weekend, I wore shorts and like a fishing shirt, the real thin material, and was hot. And this morning I got up to 26 degrees. So it's a little chilly. The Mississippi, Jekyll and Hyde weather has popped up. And so it'll be 26 today, 20-something tomorrow. And then I think by this weekend it'll be back up maybe in the 60s for the game. I haven't really looked that far ahead to know for sure. But it'll be more bearable on Saturday when the Aggies come calling here in Oxford.
I think Saturday will be sunny and 71 degrees, something like that.
Yeah.
So it should be relatively comfortable. But I just have a hard time just looking. It's like, man, you're bundled up. What is going on? I'm in long sleeves, and it's like 57 degrees, and I'm like, man, it's too cold right now. It is too cold.
Yeah. It's my dog even thought it was cold. She went outside and immediately was like, let me back in.
Nope. It's like I'm done with this. Anyway, let's start talking about the football game this weekend. Texas A&M has a front seven that is really good. Edgerrin Cooper is probably the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. They have McKinley Jackson, who's from Ocean Springs, Mississippi. They have Walter Nolan, who is from Tennessee. And those guys playing the defensive line kind of control stuff. I think Lane Kiffin said in his press conference today on his teleconference that the average for Texas playing against Texas A&M is like 3rd and 9+. So I think it's going to be pretty important that Ole Miss kind of stays on schedule. It's 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2. If you can do that, you'll be pretty successful. But the question is, how do we do that, Josh?
I don't know. And being a numbers guy, one of the things that I wrote down and never really talked about was our problem with threes. And one of the threes that we have problem with is 3rd down and specifically 3rd and long. So if we have a bunch of 3rd and 9s, I mean, we do convert some, but against this front seven, I just don't know. That's another thing I wrote down was this is going to be their front defensive front versus ours, and which offensive line can handle that better is going to help out. Now, I do give the nod to our quarterback, and I'm not knocking Max Johnson, but I was looking over the numbers, and it's just not really comparable. And some other numbers that jumped out at me, this is not necessarily exactly for this, but first quarter and fourth quarter. First quarter, we're plus 72 on the year. Fourth quarter, we're plus 52. That adds up to 15.5 of our 17.5 that we're on the plus side this season. And that's including the Bama game. That is including Mercer. I know that changes some things. The only the only time that we were held to single digits in a half, we finished 3 times this year. Twice was in the loss to Bama. And so, I mean, we got to have some kind of game plan to get it out of Dart's hands fast. Mm-hmm. I think we do need to do some side-to-side. You talk about the jet sweeps. I don't care how we get it, whether they're quick swing passes or jet sweeps, a combination of the two, running outside some. But we got to get, kind of lateral side to side just to try to wear them down a bit. So it may look sluggish and slow at first. Hopefully we can come out the gate and score on the first drive and keep that going. But as the game wears on, that middle, like you said, the middle 8 minutes, the middle 2 quarters, basically second, third quarter, if we can just survive that and not go 3 and out every time and put some pressure on that defense, even if we don't score, if we just keep the ball for a little bit of time and make them run around and chase us, then hopefully, even though they're superhuman athletes that they'll finally start getting a little tired. And if we could just get them on their heels, that's what we did to LSU. I know that their defense is supposed to be suspect, but they still got dudes on defense. And we had them guessing a little bit. And if you just cause that split second of indecision, that's the difference between completing the pass and having it batted away. That's the difference between hitting a hole and Juckins getting 15 yards or the linebacker waiting on him there and for a 2-yard loss, is that split second. So, we saw it with the long touchdown at Auburn when Perkins, hit the guy in the backfield, but he was a little late getting there and he kind of slid off. And it's going to happen from time to time, but we want to create that indecision if we can and just get them just a half step slower, and we give ourselves a chance.
Yeah, and you mentioned Quinshon Judkins. A&M is absolutely going to be focused on Quinshon Judkins because of what he did last year, and that'll be interested to see. And this is a game. This is kind of a Jaxson Dart legacy game, and what I mean by that is over the next 9 or so days, a decent portion of the story that is Jaxson Dart is going to be written, because this is the real thing. And I talked about this on my show. When was that? Wednesday. That if he beats A&M and then goes to Georgia and wins that game, and he has us at 11-1, whether he makes the playoffs or not that doesn't matter. And he comes back for his senior year with a chance to get Ole Miss into the tournament. You're talking about rarefied air. You're talking about something that Ole Miss has never seen. And I get that old timers are very much fond of Jake Gibbs and Archie Manning. I had a comment on a video today about those two. I get that people my age are very much in favor of Eli Manning. And there are some Chad Kelly people, and there's even some Matt Corral people that's going on. But none of them, not a single one of them, had a chance to do something that was done there. Because even when Jake Gibbs was doing his thing during that era of Ole Miss football, because 57 to 63, that 6-year period is probably the best 6-year period in Ole Miss sports history. They were alternating quarterbacks then. There's 3 guys that were taking snaps. So you didn't have a guy that was the dude. Now, Jake Gibbs finished high in the Heisman ranking. Archie Manning, Eli Manning, all of those finished high in the Heisman ranking. None of them had a chance to do what's on the table for Jaxson Dart. By the way, this is the 3rd year in a row that Ole Miss has had a top 10 ranking.
That just doesn't even sound right. Mm-hmm. Just growing up around, like I said, I hadn't always been like the biggest fan, whatever, but always close to it, always know about it, And then, of course, when I finally came and spent some time here on campus now, I believe red and blue, which sometimes I even say is a curse because we just haven't been that good, but now we are. And this is also a chance, and fair or unfair to Dart or Kiffin or anybody else. And I think coaches are different than players. The players, if they come, they play whatever. But I don't know that they would have it any different anyway. But fair or unfair, this writes their story. Like you said, this also, this is a chance to change Ole Miss football history. And it feels like, and I may eat these words, but it just feels like, some guys handle this, some guys don't. I know that Vandy did, there were times in Vandy where people were talking about Dart this and Dart that. Whatever, y'all, they wanted to go home at halftime. Mm-hmm. They did not want to come out and play the second half, period. Now,
Vandy was not going to score 4 touchdowns and come back.
That's right. Even though we left points on the board, they were not going to beat us at 26-0. Mm-hmm. Even when they brought the 6'7", 235 guy in and he was running it up the middle and I got worried a little bit, they still weren't going to score enough touchdowns. It was going to take them too long to catch up if they were able to score that many. And so that's why I'm glad we called the timeout and punted, by the way, because if we give it to them at midfield, we'd have made it easy on them again. We don't need to do that. Make teams drive the field. I said it, if we can get to 14, I feel pretty good. If we get to 21, I feel really good because I'm just not sure this is going to be it. To me, this is not a 53 over and under game. Like, take the under. Although I'm always wrong. So you take the over because I said take the under. But, I just feel like the legacy that it could leave for Dart, for Kiffin, for the team. But Dart I just believe that he has that moxie. He has that whatever that it is, that whenever the lights come on and his number's called for, it doesn't change. Like, he gets better with the pressure. He's kind of refined under fire.
Whatever question you have, if you go, Jaxson Dart, we need to see Jaxson Dart do X, whatever it is. Jaxson Dart almost immediately answers that question whenever that becomes a narrative. And that tells me this kid likes the spotlight. There hasn't been any situation that he's walked into that the moment has been too big. Even the Alabama game where he was getting beat up a little bit, it's a situation to where if I think they game planned it a little bit different, that game goes a little bit differently. And I just genuinely like where he is. Now, is Jaxson Dart going to be the same quarterback as Eli Manning? And people always talk about a little bit later on today on the channel, an interview with Bill Flowers is up there. And the way Bill Flowers was taught to play football at a college level was different than what Jaxson Dart is asked to do. And sometimes people see the things that really worked and were advantageous in an Eli system, and then they're trying to put that in this modern system, and it doesn't necessarily match up. Ole Miss gives up things to go fast. And part of that is a 5-person route, a hot route sometimes. So sometimes they can get got. Sometimes it can look like Tecmo Bowl whenever the defense gets the right play. But when it's right, when they're on, and when things are going, this offense has wide open people going down the field, and 2 or 3 times a game, and it doesn't matter who they're playing, that is going to pop up. So know that this is going to look a little bit different than it did when Eli Manning was calling the shots. But what Jaxson Dart is doing is no less impressive, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, and I'll say this. I haven't been able to be in the stadium as much in the recent years, but being there Saturday night, and I was in the end zone, so I was, had a view from either in front or behind the offense the entire game. What you're talking about, it jumped out at me how we would snap the ball and 1 or 2 guys might run a route, and the other guys were basically just occupying space and defenders. Even Trey Harris, when it was not quote unquote his turn, wasn't really running what you would, what I thought like when in the 90s when I was at Ole Miss. I mean, when the ball was snapped, everybody was busting it down the field doing something. Whether it was an out route, a go route, a post, or whatever, or why, it didn't matter what they cross, whatever it was, everybody was busting to do it. And the quarterback, Eli, how fast are you processing, your first read, your second read, your third read, what defensive guy are you reading, all the things that have to go through their head. And so I know that that's something that's been questioned with Dart about processing things. But as you said, I just feel like the kid has stepped up and answered the bell every time it's been asked. What does concern me, and I love Charlie Weiss and Lane Kiffin to death, but what concerns me is their game plan. Is their game plan going to allow Dart to do what he does? And is it going to, I don't know. The concerning thing is when things go sideways, it feels like we spin our wheels. And I know some of that is setting stuff up. Some of that is we got to be honest with the run and try to get it, like you say, earn the right to pass the ball, that kind of stuff. But it's just, I really hope that they get him in that position. And I think they will. I think they realize, especially going against the number 1 D-line with all the sacks and tackles for losses, that if they don't get the ball out of his hands, if they try to do 2-3 second dropbacks, that A&M's just going to feast.
Yeah. And I genuinely think Lane Kiffin has mentioned several times how impressive this defense is. I can imagine they're going to try and help out that offensive line.
Yeah.
They just genuinely are. And I think the game plan is going to look a little bit more like LSU than against Alabama. I think they were egotistical. They were kind of prideful a little bit when they played Alabama, and Alabama just kind of slapped them down.
Well, and you've mentioned it too. And really the thing I wrote down was I was going to start out with 2 words: Pete Golding. Mm-hmm. If he was my defensive coordinator, I would have to change. I would have to adapt because of what he's been able to do. But at this point, you talk about belief, you talk about the plays and how this defense is explosive, and they're 3rd in sacks or 4th in sacks or whatever it is, and 8th in tackles for losses or 9th, whatever it is nationally. So they're in the top 10 in both, top 5 and 1. And, early on it was like, oh, is this a gimmick? Is he just getting away with this? And now that we're this far into the season, this is no gimmick anymore. Not only do the players believe, not only to understand their roles, but I believe that other people are starting to believe, including Lane Kiffin and the offensive staff. And that's why he called timeout and didn't go for it on 4th down in the middle of the field this past, even though it was Vandy. Don't do it. Don't give them life when you don't need to. And the same thing with A&M. I dare Max Johnson to drive 85 yards on this, and let's see if he can do it. Maybe he can.
And if he does it, do it again.
Yeah. And So one stat I want to throw out there, and some people have scoffed at this. A&M as a team has 28 touchdowns, 1 defensive and 27 offensive. Jaxson Dart and Quinshon Judkins, just the 2 of them, 30. So now, obviously, that's the quarterback and the lead running back, but Ole Miss is, I think, 37 or 38, somewhere in that range, so around 10 more than A&M as a team.
And A&M hasn't scored a touchdown in the second half of a football game since like the Arkansas game.
Oh, I didn't look into it that close. I didn't see when they had scored.
Yeah, it's been a while of second half touchdowns. So Bobby Petrino and them are going to be able to make some plays. He's a good offensive coach. Bobby Petrino got his reputation for a reason. So I'm not expecting Ole Miss to hold A&M under 300 yards again, like they have the last 3 weeks. But I do think that Pete Golding is going to have a decent plan. I think we're going to see – this is going to be the day when I think Centarian Perkins kind of announces himself, because he plays against quarterbacks that can run the ball. Well, Max Johnson is kind of on the edge of that. He's a mobile guy, but he's not like Jaden Daniels. This will be the first time the Centarian Perkins plays in that role where he can get after the quarterback and do the things to do that Harold Perkins type stuff, and you might see him get a sack or 2 in this ballgame.
Yeah, and because Johnson doesn't move like that, Perkins can be a little bit more aggressive in going after him, because you won't have, I mean, I'm not knocking the kid, but you don't have the video game whoop, whoop, slip around in the speed to get away. Although I don't think he's quite this deceptive, but when I think about long and lanky quarterbacks that run like that, I go back to Matt Jones, and it just makes my heart.
Don't say that name.
I know. So, but I do think we have a good shot here. I think that our defense, and again, I believe now. I believe on the defensive side for sure. The offense we've had belief in for a while, and I'm so impressed with what Golding has gotten out of his team, out of his guys, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I keep going back and forth on this one, and on this morning's podcast, I gave a score, and it was like 27-21, and now I'm not so sure. I'm thinking more 34 to 24. I think that is the range I'm looking at right now. What about you?
I just think that 50-something is too high. I kind of waffle back and forth, and I actually wrote down a prediction, and then I changed it when I saw the line at 53 and added some points. I said, I don't know. So I'm gonna go. Actually, I have the changed one written down. I upped it, but I think I'm gonna drop it back down. I don't know. I'm waffling back and forth. I think it's close. I think Ole Miss pulls away. The first thing I wrote down was 27-13. 27.
I actually like that score. I like that score. I went with 27-21 on this morning's show.
Yeah, and it may be that A&M does that, and if they get a defensive touchdown or get a turnover, in the red zone or something, then that could happen. But if they have to drive the field every time, I just don't see them getting more than a couple touchdowns. And so I just don't. And again, I could be dead wrong, but that's just not what I see happening.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Josh Guest joining us weekly like he always does. He'll also be on our pregame show Saturday morning, bright and early from the Grove. Josh, man, take care and be careful, man.
All right. Appreciate it. Howdy toddy.
Howdy toddy.